Ataman as a chew, a Mezita or Ted is in it. There's a tar. A deuced in the China Helen, a judge also teach or cadet in. A well done a charcoal and does it on. So no CSOT. What's on a D, Nizu, a Jean Tene, go not out get the COT, go hake, go museum. So T do the go masses in New Zealand. Good as COT, good on it is not see, must see. A time is at a chew, Zita or tears in the must see.
Please be seated. I'd like to thank Sir Gargan from whoever for the opening guiding words. Minister statements. Minister for Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to update you on new initiatives being introduced over the coming months to enhance public safety for residents and road users in the Territory. We can all agree that when it comes to safety, there is a lot on the line. There are almost 27,000 licensed drivers registered in the Northwest Territories. The latest Territorial Traffic Collisions Report shows that nearly 450 vehicle collisions in 1 year, with 18.5% of those resulting in injury, and a whopping 31% of those involving impaired driving. In July 2023, the RCMP conducted a roadside survey in Yellowknife and found that 16% of nighttime drivers that were tested had consumed alcohol, drugs, or both, particularly those aged 25 to 34. Mr. Speaker, we are launching new initiatives to make our roads safer, including a new highway road conditions map. This map will provide modernized, up-to-the-minute information on ferry and ice crossings, road closures due to incidents, poor weather, construction, or wildfires. Commercial drivers will get real-time updates on weight restrictions and winter road conditions. We also have 12 cameras that users will be able to view to see conditions of the road for themselves. Our system will give drivers instant and reliable highway updates for safer and more efficient travel. In response to a changing climate, gathering data to inform our decisions is crucial. The data collected through this system will help us better plan and maintain our highways, helping improve our transportation systems for the future. Additionally, we are launching a new safe driving campaign aimed at reducing collisions and promoting safe driving practices across the territories. The Government of the Northwest Territories is committed to ensuring the safety of people on our roads. In the North, as you know, these roads are our lifeline, connecting remote communities and delivering essential supplies. Mr. Speaker, driver and road safety impacts everyone. Basic awareness can prevent serious injuries, save lives, and ensure the integrity of our highway system. This campaign will bring together several N.W.T departments, the RCMP, and communities to work together on joint promotions throughout the year. It will focus on raising awareness, changing behaviors, and encouraging responsible driving habits. I encourage all residents to participate in the Safe Driving campaign, to be mindful of speed limits, avoid distractions, never drive impaired, and always wear a seatbelt. And in closing, I want to acknowledge the efforts of law enforcement, community leaders, and everyone committed to promoting road safety. This dedication is vital to the success of the campaign and to the well-being of our residents, because we all agree there's a lot on the line. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Minister statements. Minister statements. Member statements. Member from Inuvik Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to talk about the challenges facing our students trying to access health care while away at school. There are constituents in my riding who have children attending university down south, and while the students are away at school, medical appointments are arranged in Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, sometimes you wait 4, 6, 8 months for these appointments. These students are away from home studying, are required by the N.W.T to attend these specialized appointments unaccompanied without any support. Mr. Speaker, I recognize we are in a time of fiscal restraint, but surely we are not asking our youth to attend a specialized medical appointment outside of the territory unaccommodated and unsupported. Mr. Speaker, these are our N.W.T youth. They don't have experience navigating healthcare systems, especially in big centres like Edmonton. How can we expect these youth to advocate for themselves at a time like this? Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that medical concerns are being communicated and medical information is clearly understood to ensure the best healthcare decisions are made for our youth. Mr. Speaker, the issues and challenges with medical travel have been recognized by both sides of this House, and I know the Minister is alive to the gaps in the medical travel policy. Mr. Speaker, on the ministerial policy on medical travel escort criteria, a non-medical escort will be authorized when, as per Section 6, brackets 2, brackets A, the eligible person is under the age of 19 and requires an escort. Mr. Speaker, who decides when a minor who is under 19 years of age requires an escort or does not require an escort? Is there any conversation with the client or family when determining whether an escort is required? Is it the right to appeal a medical travel decision made clear to clients? Mr. Speaker, how are clients informed of their right to complain about decisions? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Newfoundland Lake. Member statement. Member from Moultrie.
Thank you. Rental cabs. Mr. Speaker, today I want to speak about housing and the ever-increasing cost of rent for N.W.T residents. Mr. Speaker, it is becoming more apparent with every passing year that the price for people to rent any housing accommodation in the N.W.T, especially here in the capital, is getting out of control. With the cost of living crisis that we are already in, some families have to choose between paying rent or putting food on the table to feed their families. Mr. Speaker, how are we going to attract more people to move here if all rental options are sky high or expensive? Right now, YELLOWKNIFE is home to many transient people who come here temporarily for a short period of time, use up our resources, then leave and never come back. Mr. Speaker, it's getting to a point where people need to be wealthy just to rent a room, let alone rent a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment or condo. A 1-bedroom apartment in YELLOWKNIFE is $1,900. A 2-bedroom apartment is $2,500. And a 3-bedroom townhouses is about $3,000 and up in rental costs, and plus utilities. It's happening all over the city. Who are these landlords? Are they northern-based owners? The N.W.T. So what's happening here is that the N.W.T. is paying rent to major southern landlords through income assistance. People are working just to have a roof over their head. There is no way no one in this day and age is going to save money for a down payment on a house unless their family has a deep pockets. Mr. Speaker, last year during the 19th Assembly, a member brought forward a motion urging the government to introduce a mechanism that would provide for a maximum allowable rent increase for private rental units in the N.W.T. In other words, rent control, which would create a cap on rent increases. Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to conclude my statement.
Thank you. Member from Moultrie. Member from Moultrie is asking for unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Seeing no nays, you may conclude your statement.
Mr. Speaker, right now, no such mechanism exists in the N.W.T, but I believe that it should. As a government, we need to be proactive in providing practical solutions to the everyday problems that people deal with. Something must be done to help curb the disgraceful, never-ending increases to rental costs in the N.W.T. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Moultrie. Member statements. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to highlight a recent report by Greenland's Economic Council on the current state of Greenland's economy and recommendations related to economic transition and sustainability. I want to highlight this report as it relates to ECE's business plan goal of developing an economic vision for the N.W.T. There are some interesting parallels with what is highlighted in the Greenland report and our own economic situation. The first aspect of the report I want to draw attention to is related to how the government can best strengthen productivity in the private sector. The report emphasizes the best way to achieve this is through transparency and stability of regulatory framework conditions and cautions against sustained tax-financed support for business which risks locking employment into supported activities. The report also emphasizes the need for increased efficiency and focus in the public sector, which can help to reduce costs and free up labor to support a broader economic base. The report argues this can be achieved through clearly developed goal requirements, well-defined management responsibility for achieving the goals with given budgets, and follow-up on goal achievement. The aspect of the report I would like to draw particular attention to is related to productivity gains from training. The report states that it is a crucial prerequisite for a more self-sustaining economy to increase the level of education in the population. Greenland faces similar challenges to those we face in the N.W.T, and the report emphasizes the gains which can be realized from all levels in the education spectrum, from early childhood through to post-secondary. I strongly agree with these conclusions and continue to emphasize the need for our government to place education at the forefront of our economic vision. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of ITI, and sorry I said ECE earlier, I meant ITI, but it is the same minister for what it's worth, has stated economic vision development will be a collaborative process, which I agree with completely. But I don't want vision development to simply take the form of a what we heard report. What I would like to strongly emphasize as we move forward with economic visioning is that we take an analytical and evidence-based approach to it, similar to what was produced by Greenland's Economic Council. I will table a translated version of the report in the House tomorrow for anyone who's interested in reading it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Frame Lake. Member statements, member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the fiscal sustainability strategy was announced, the finance minister specifically said, quote, "I do not want people to presume that this is about job cuts. It's not. We are experiencing labor market shortages across sectors, and we need our public servants." Mr. Speaker, we also need our public servants to feel valued. A large part of why I continue to ask about the status of government renewal in my reply to the budget and overall budget discussions in the House is because I want the minister to use its findings strategically to help place staff in areas and functions that need capacity. I also want staff to feel supported to grow and evolve in their roles or new roles that excite them. I want to stop hearing of experiences that I saw firsthand in my 15 years as a public servant, where people were blindsided and choices were made for them. Yesterday, UNW leaders and members rallied outside because once again, choices around our public service and how they're employed are first made and framed on cost savings. The Minister of Finance continually says that the public service is our most valuable resource as a government, and I agree. Where we disagree is how we make unilateral decisions for their future without time for consultation and discussion. Employment is a partnership, but too often public servants find this partnership to be one-sided. I will have questions for the Minister of Finance at the appropriate time.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Member statements. Member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to congratulate the students of the Mackenzie Delta communities of Acknowledgements, Fort McPherson and Sigachik, who have completed their grade 12 and will receive or have received their diplomas. These young men and women are an inspiration to themselves, to their families, and to their communities. These 16 individuals and future leaders of their respective communities are to be commended on their achievements and future endeavors in whatever they pursue in the near future. The following students graduated grade 12 from Aklavik: Tisha Cooey, Caden McLeod, Matthew McLeod, Sergey Nedelko, Victoria Simple Gordon, Destiny Benoit, Larry Sidda-Chinley. From Fort McPherson: Bryson Nirsu, Ryland Firth, Donovan Cooey, David Tetlichi, Caleb Niando, Kiana Nursu, Ariana Kivik, from Sigachik, Connor Van Loon, Drayden Nazi. I would like to ask my colleagues in joining me in congratulating these students on a great accomplishment and wish them great success in the coming years. Mr. Speaker, as I will be traveling home tomorrow, at this time I would like to wish my colleagues, staff, and especially the interpreters a great summer and spend some quality time with your families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Mackenzie Delta. Member statement. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, in a land as vast and untamed as the Northwest Territories, ground search and rescue services are key to any emergency where persons are missing or in distress on land or inland waterways. Ground search and rescue efforts are multi-jurisdictional, relying on cooperation from many different governments, agencies, and civilians, so that trained professionals, often in volunteer capacities, can be properly equipped and dispatched to get to work saving lives. There are many reasons why people go missing or end up needing help on the land every year. Many travel long distances in between remote communities, practice traditional lifestyles of hunting and trapping, or are simply looking to experience the beauty of the North's natural environment. In 2018, for example, there were 24 ground search and rescue incidents spread out across every region of the Northwest Territories. To keep our communities safe, the North needs strong ground search and rescue operations to ensure every incident is responded to adequately and resolved positively. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the N.W.T Search and Rescue System Review final report, completed in 2022, came to a startling conclusion: that ground search and rescue services in the N.W.T lag far behind other provinces and territories, and outlined concerning deficiencies in how these services are supported and maintained. Also concerning is the fact that this report has not yet been publicly released, despite being finalized years ago. Thankfully, I've gotten a hold of this report, thanks to the diligent work of a constituent, and can provide a short summary. There's no of those critical findings. There's no mandate for municipal and Indigenous governments to have provisions for ground search and rescue teams. There are no mandates for departments to expand search and rescue capacity. The N.W.T provides no training or equipment for search and rescue teams, and there's only one team trained to the proper standards for the entire territory, which operates out of Yellowknife, and they are forced to fundraise on their own to get the resources they need. Mr. Speaker, these realities force other agencies, such as the RCMP, to operate outside of their scope during search and rescue operations. Hunters and Trappers associations and the Rangers do their best to contribute, but they are not adequately trained or equipped. There's much more to say on the subject, and it's time for the Minister to make this report public and begin following its urgent recommendations before more lives are lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Member statements. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we conclude the last 2 days of our spring sitting of the Legislative Assembly until October, I'd like to express my heartfelt recognition of two important dates that hold significance for the Indigenous peoples across Canada, and more particularly here in the Northwest Territories. Mr. Speaker, National and Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st, is a day to celebrate and honor the diverse cultures, unique heritage, and outstanding achievements of Canada's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This day has been celebrated since 1996, coinciding with the summer solstice, which holds cultural significance for many Indigenous groups across our territory. It's a time to reflect on the resilience and strength and immense contributions of Indigenous peoples in shaping the fabric of our nation. Mr. Speaker, June 23rd marks another milestone, the anniversary of the signing of the Sawtooth N.W.T and Comprehensive Land Claim, dated 1993. This historic agreement between the Sawtooth and Métis people and the Government of Canada enshrines Indigenous rights over land, resources, self-government in the Sawtooth region. It was a landmark achievement in the ongoing journey towards reconciliation recognition of Indigenous sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, as we break for the summer, I invite all members of this House, and indeed all Northerners, to take the moment to reflect the importance of these dates. Let us also acknowledge that there is still much work to be done on the path of reconciliation. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to express my deepest gratitude and admiration for the Indigenous leaders, elders, youth, and community members who work very diligently and hard to build a stronger, equitable, and more inclusive Northwest Territories. Much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Sut 2. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is easy to get overwhelmed and depressed at the scale of the challenges and struggles facing communities in this territory, especially challenges around housing and economic development. But to move forward, we need to build on our strengths. Today, I'd like to focus on a positive story of a community finding innovative solutions and taking back control over their housing crisis. It's also an inspiring story of collaboration between dedicated folks in both my riding, Yellowknife North, and the community of Fort Good Hope. The project is the Fort Good Hope Construction Centre. This will be a 4-season facility in which new housing units will be locally constructed by community members for community members. It was recently awarded millions of dollars in funding as one of the winners of CMHC's Housing Supply Challenge. The Fort Good Hope Construction Centre will provide a heated indoor industrial space where community members will be trained and employed year-round in modular home construction, rather than having to take on seasonal or short-term jobs. Training and employment will be integrated. It will have broader economic development benefits by equipping the community to participate in many other capital projects in the region. It's an opportunity for housing to be designed and constructed in alignment with local needs, with an emphasis on long-term quality and energy efficiency. It will reduce the time, the cost, and the risk of building new housing by reducing reliance on imported contractors. The initiative is a partnership between N.W.T Development, so that's the business arm of Yamoga Land Corporation, and Taylor Architecture Group, or TAG, which is based in my riding. It builds on many years of hard work by the Kashogotene Housing Society, and the project has been supported by Housing N.W.T as well as Aurora College, which is enthusiastic about partnering with Fort Good Hope to deliver trades training programs at the new construction centre. Mr. Speaker, this is exactly the type of local economic development that this territory needs. I hope we can be inspired by these efforts, to learn from them, and to build on them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Member statements. Member from Toonaday-Willowday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Slave River originates in the Peace River, Athabasca Delta, and the forks of Peace River, and which drains into Athabasca River and Lake Athabasca, which drains also into the Slave River that flows north into the Northwest Territories, north of Fort Resolution, that drains into Great Slave Lake and all the way down to the Mackenzie Delta, which impacts communities all along the way. Mr. Speaker, yesterday a bulletin came out to us from Alberta as per Trans-Boundary Agreement, notifying us that the runoff water from the Suncor Oil Sands mine to the Athabasca River tested above compliance parameters, meaning that runoff from the retaining ponds could be releasing hazardous chemicals into the watershed. Mr. Speaker, these chemicals can be toxic to the health of those who fish on the river downstream from the oil sands in northern Alberta. I am concerned that the Slave River, which runs through my riding, could be carrying these chemicals up from this accident, from this incident in Alberta and contaminating the fish. The people of my riding of Toonaday-Willowday have been experiencing high cancer rates for many generations, and we are still trying to figure out what caused the cancer rates. Colonialisms in the north have been very negative consequences for the health of Indigenous people, so it's no surprise my communities are always on guard. I know we are trying to change how we develop our resources in partnership with corporations, Indigenous governments, and other provincial jurisdictions in order to introduce more social responsibility and environmental sustainability practices, but more needs to be done. I hope to ask the Minister of ECC later today for some more clarity on this issue because my constituents are very concerned. There is still more testing needed and information to be gathered, but I would like to give the Minister an opportunity to alleviate some of these concerns, and I will be asking some questions later today so that the North is better prepared for incidents like this in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Tune-a-Day-Willowdays. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to talk about training supports for shelter workers. Mr. Speaker, finding ways to help de-escalate violence for shelter workers who work on the front line is a goal of mine, and I'm sure it's supported by many of our colleagues here. We would like to see the de-escalation of violence long before it gets out of hand and the RCMP have to be called or anyone certainly gets hurt. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, from the RCMP, they had mentioned that over 2,268 calls to shelters in Yellowknife over a period of 2 years, that's April 2022 to April 2024, of those calls, Mr. Speaker, only 3% resulted in charges. So what it really says, Mr. Speaker, in 2 years, those 68, there was only 68 incidences that actually warranted in charges. It sort of speaks to the outcome and the nature of the policing of what's actually happening is they're attending events, attending incidents that are getting out of hand, but maybe there's a better path, such as supporting our frontline workers with de-escalation skills. Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan First Nations Shelter Worker Training Program offers a program for prevention of types of violence. They give shelter workers supports. They have a curriculum that's adapted to the specific needs of shelter workers. Mr. Speaker, this is the type of training we could work with our fantastic Aurora College to help ensure it's spread and implemented and offered here in the Northwest Territories, throughout our territories, in every community that has learning centers or even regional centers. Mr. Speaker, to highlight a couple of the course points, it does teaches people communication skills, engagements with clients on therapeutic issues, talks about grief loss, helps them documentation, crisis management. It goes through a lot of wonderful things, Mr. Speaker. Again, Aurora College could be leading this initiative, as well as supported by the Department of Health and Education and Justice. Look, it's a government initiative before you know it, Mr. Speaker. That said, Mr. Speaker, in talking to many shelter workers, they're always stressed by the amount of challenges and the lack of training they get. They get limited funds to pay people, which means they get a restriction of pool of the type of skills and opportunities that can show up there. And those who are armed with the skills and talents to do this type of work tend to look for better paying work with the territorial government. In short, Mr. Speaker, if we truly believe and value our relationship and partnership with these shelter organizations and we want to support the shelter workers, we should be setting them up with partnerships. So, Mr. Speaker, I will be asking the government to ensure that we can include this type of training in future contribution agreements later today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, member from Yellowknife Centre. Member statements. Member from N.W.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the 2024 high school graduates of the N.W.T riding. These young people graduating from high school are an inspiration. The work to completing a high school education in a small community is a community effort, a family's effort, the school's effort, and the students' determination. A shout out to the students in Polituk, Ulahaktuk, and Tuktoyaktuk, as we all see you, and we're all so proud of you. Angek School in Polituk is Julian Green, Nikki Rubin, Billy Rubin, Joel Thrasher, and Caitlin Rubin. Helen Calvik Ilihakpik in Ulahaktuk is Nathaniel Nilgak, Wyatt Malgokak, Albert Okina, Michaela Oliktuak, Grace Kittikudluk, Royce Kunaluk, Nicholas Olinak, Rebecca Pierce, and Cheyenne Joss. Mangalalak School in Tuktoyaktuk is Kirsted Carpenter, Lena Rose Bates, Tyson Mangalalak Rubin, Malina Panaktaluk, Jackson Chixie, and Tina Steen. Koinaini, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from N.W.T. Member statements. Member for Hay River South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a proud representative of Hay River, I rise today to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the graduating classes of Hay River. This is a very special occasion not only for the students, but for our entire community as we celebrate the achievements and the potential of these young individuals. To the graduating students, I want to commend you for your hard work, determination, and resilience throughout your academic journey. As you prepare on the next chapter of your lives, I encourage you to reflect on the values and lessons you have learned during your time in school. Cherish your friendships you have made, treasure the memories you have created, and never forget the support and guidance your teachers, families, and your community have given. As you step into the new world beyond these school walls and maybe the N.W.T, remember that you are well equipped to face whatever challenges and the opportunities that come your way. Whether you choose to pursue a higher education, enter the workforce, become a journeyman plumber because you know some things never stop flowing, or maybe just to follow your dreams and passion, just know that you have the skills, knowledge, and determination to succeed. I have no doubt that the graduating classes of our Hay River schools will go on to achieve great things and make meaningful contribution to our community and beyond. You are the future leaders, innovators, and change makers that I'm confident that you will make us proud. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the teachers, staff, and administrators all over the N.W.T who have played vital roles in shaping the lives of our youth. Your dedication, commitment have not gone unnoticed, and we are truly grateful for all that you do. I also want to do a little shout out to my daughter, Ellen McKay-Avenko, who celebrated her 18th birthday on Monday and will also be graduating this next week. Way to go, kid. Congratulations once again to the graduating class of 2024. And in the words of the famous Dr. Seuss, kids, you'll move mountains. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Hay River South. Member statements. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's that time of year where I get to talk about something special that is very special in a student's life. It's graduation. I believe this is the 8th time I'll get to talk about this special moment. Like other writings in the Henday, we'll see several graduations from various schools this month, starting with kindergarten. As I've said before, this is an important milestone for parents and students. We get to see the first stage of what we hope are many more graduation ceremonies. Depending on the school, we see kindergarten, grade 6, grade 9, and grade 12 graduations. I can tell you each celebration is unique and special. Today, I'd like to recognize 15 students who completed their elementary, junior, senior high journey. To the 8 students from Echo Denny School and the 7 students from Little Cove Regional High School, congratulations on completing this journey. It is a good start on your life's journey moving forward. I know there has been some fun and challenging times, but I can tell you it has prepared you for the next journey, whether it's going on to future schooling, trades, travel, or work. Echo Denny School grad ceremony is scheduled for today or tomorrow at 6 p.m. and Little Cove Regional High School is on Saturday. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend either celebrations, but I wish them all the best during their special moment. Colleagues, I'd like to tell the grads the diploma you received today is your insurance policy paid in full for all your hard work over the past 13 years. The value of this policy depends on how much effort you put into your education and what you do with it as you go out in the world. All the best to them on this special day. As I've done in the past, I do have some words of encouragement in recognizing the 15 grads, which I'll ask deemed as read. To the parents and families, thank you for all the support for the graduates. You sure should be very happy and proud of your child today. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to wish all the 2024 graduating classes across the N.W.T all the best and congratulations on a job well done. Thank you. Member statements. Member from Deschaux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I want to remember Peter Wilford Canadian in Fort Providence. Peter was born and raised in Fort Providence. He came from a very large traditional family. Growing up, his family spent a lot of time out on the land, where Peter learned the traditional way of life. In his early years, Peter attended Diamond Jeunesse Secondary School in Hay River. Later, he went on to Sir Franklin High School in Yellowknife, Sir John Franklin High School. He then moved back home to Fort Providence as he was needed to help with family, during which time he fell in love with Phoebe Bonrose. Together they have 2 boys. Peter was actively involved with Fort Providence District Education, and he contributed to decision-making processes for the community of Fort Providence. It was great to see community members like Peter being actively engaged in educational matters. He also loved volunteering for the community. Peter worked for the Jaticon Friendship Center as a radio announcer. He was a happy person to be around. He always had some funny stories to tell. Peter took time to talk to you just to make you laugh. One of his hobbies he enjoyed was cooking. He liked to cook for his family and especially his grandchildren. One day during campaigning for the territorial election, I was surprised to see Peter at my door with a plate of shrimp Alfredo and a Caesar salad. He said to me, "You're really busy and you need to eat, so I brought you a plate." This is the kind of man he was. You always see him wanting to get involved when there were community feasts or special events. He was a real people person. He leaves behind his common-law wife, Phoebe Bonrose, his children, Jay and Nathaniel, and his 5 grandchildren whom he adored. My friend Peter was my official agent during the 2023 election. Peter Wilford Canadian was a great man with a good sense of humor, and he is sorely missed by his family and friends. Rest in peace, Peter, and mercy for your friendship to us all. Mercy.
Our condolences go out to the family and friends. He was an amazing man. Members' statements. Member statements. Returns to oral questions. Returns to oral questions. Recognitions of visitors in the galleries. Member from Newwick-Bootlegg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to recognize my daughter Haley and her husband Anthony visiting us from Anchorage. Haley obviously was raised in Inuvik, had taught school there for 6 years, and actually is a former page in this house many years ago. Her husband Anthony, it's his first visit to Canada. He's originally from Michigan, and Anthony is a Airman First Class in the 3rd Maintenance Squadron at Emmeldorf Air Force Base in Anchorage. So, welcome. Thank you.
Welcome. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member from the Satu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize 2 pages, originally from the Satu, the beautiful community of Delaney. It's Nevaeh Takazo and Jalen Gadet. Masi.
Thank you. Member from the Satu. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery are the people that we haven't had the opportunity to recognize. We thank you very much. It's great to see an audience, especially a young audience here today, and hopefully you enjoy our sitting and holiday. Well, I guess I just found out where those young people are from. Welcome from Welladay School here in Yellowknife. So thank you very much for being here. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Acknowledgements. Member from Satu.
Thank you, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to announce that the 4 students will be graduating from the community of Culver Lake School this year: Rachel Blancho, Devin Cashon, Bobby Lafferty, and Troy Tucho. The entire community of Colville Lake and the Sati region want to congratulate these young fellows, or young adults, graduates. We wish them the very best in their education journey and career choices. Must see, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Satu. Acknowledgements, acknowledgements, oral questions. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions today are for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, how many people will be affected by the proposed closure of the Fort Smith Correctional Complex Men's Unit? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Fort Smith Correctional Facility has 32 employees, which would mean that there'd be 32 employees who would be affected if the facility were closed. Thank you.
Or Minister of Finance. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How many vacant positions are there open and available in Fort Smith that are not proposed to be cut in this budget? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As of March 31st of 2024, there are 492 vacancies across the N.W.T. A vacancy obviously can come with a number of different meanings. It may mean that it may be actively being recruited for at any particular point in time. In Fort Smith specifically, Mr. Speaker, there are 647 N.W.T. positions, of which, again, as of the 31st of March, 114 were vacant. And there were 34 positions in total proposed for elimination in the 24-25 main estimates. Thank you.
Minister of Finance. Oral questions, member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What work has been done to assure the affected corrections employees that they can remain in the public service? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, any employee who is facing being affected by any sort of or form of reduction anywhere in the N.W.T, anywhere in the Northwest Territories, is subject to a process. It is one where there is a notification process, and there is indeed a staff retention policy and a staff retention guidelines. Every effort is made to ensure that anyone in an affected position is not lost as a public servant, and so indeed that process can take several months, if not quite some time, to ensure that they can best find themselves back in a new position within the public service, following those two different documents, again, the policy and the guidelines. Thank you.
Minister of Finance. Final supplementary, member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'm hoping that policy can be changed slightly, but I can talk to the Minister of Finance about that. What work can be conducted so affected employees are appropriately trained or assisted to continue to work at the public service at their current or better pay? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Great Slave. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I having noted the comment about wanting to see change to the policy and guidelines, at the present time, we do have a policy with associated guidelines, so at this point I'd not want to try to second guess what position, what individual, what training someone might have. They may have training that is beyond the position that they are in or different from the position they are in. So I would just want to emphasize again that every effort is always made to ensure that any affected employee whose position might be eliminated is not lost from the public service, relying on the policy and guidelines, but again, happy to engage with the member and see if there are areas that we can improve with a view to improving the public service all the time. Thank you.
Minister of Finance. Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier commit to releasing the N.W.T Justice Search and Rescue System Review MNP 2022 final report to the public as soon as possible and table it in this Assembly when the next opportunity arises? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Range Lake. Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely.
Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Premier commit to supporting programming such as Adventure Smart, which teaches Northerners to be prepared and self-sufficient when they journey onto the land or water, and partner with N.W.T businesses as well as federal, territorial, and municipal departments that operate in the territory's natural environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Range Lake, Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot to unpack there. I'd probably need to think about it a bit more, understand what the programs the member is speaking of are, and then we can go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Premier. Will the Premier allocate funding directly to the training of professional ground search and rescue volunteers with accountability built in to ensure they're being trained to current national standards as recommended by the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Member from Range Lake. Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's plenty of things I would like to do. This is one area where I would like to see something happen as well. What that is, I'm not quite sure yet. This does take resources, but that being said, I've already had discussions with the Minister of MACA on potential future steps on what we can do. Again, that being said, I can't make any promises. We are going through the budget process right now. We are really looking to get our financial house in order so that we can pursue activities like this, which falls in line with our public safety mandate. But that's work that still needs to be done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Final supplementary, member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this report was commissioned by the N.W.T and was completed and hasn't been implemented. So can the Premier commit to an implementation schedule that will be costed and released publicly, so we can know when these necessary life-saving changes to search and rescue will take effect? Thank you.
Range Lake, Mr. Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like every other initiative that we would like to bring forward, it has to compete with all of the other initiatives. And so we will weigh this against the other initiatives that the members have requested, initiatives that other stakeholders have requested, and plan as appropriate. Thank you.
Oral questions, member from Yonley Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My member statement today talked about trying to find ways to help de-escalate violence in shelter and programs and opportunities that exist, and I even pointed at a Saskatchewan First Nations training program. Now, there's a lot of good in all of that, of course, but there's also opportunities. So my question will be directed to the Minister of Finance, and I'm going to give her a little second here or two. The section has the Human Resource Department, and we do a lot of employee training currently right now. And so my question for the Minister of Finance is really not about that specific program per se, but the N.W.T does a ton of training to employees. Is there maybe a way to start strategizing and looking at opening it up to NGO organizations to expand it? And we run things like verbal judo that could be extraordinarily beneficial to NGOs as an example, and hence that's where the first question will start. Thank you.
Member from Yonley Centre, Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question. It's actually not new to me. It certainly has come up over the course of some years that I've been doing the budget dialogues. And I'd like to take it away, see if we can continue to work on this a bit. Some of the challenges that the programming that we have does come with costs, and it comes with costs that we pay for our employees. There's also some concerns that I've run into around at what point would you be turning someone who's not an employee to be starting to look like an employee, particularly in the case of workers who are in areas of essential services such as shelter workers. They were already, if they're receiving contribution agreements to the organization from the N.W.T, we don't want to wind ourselves up in a situation where there's any blurring of lines as to who is the employer and what services they're providing. I realize in training programs that seems a small thing, but the concern just being where those lines might be. I'm certainly happy to have a conversation around whether there's ways we can make inroads on finding access points, but not necessarily in the same or equal way that an employee might. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. Member from Yonley Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I raised the issue of the Saskatchewan First Nations offered a program, and I guess I would say to the minister that, is something like this in general, could this be worked into contribution agreements, whereas in the N.W.T works with the Department of Education through the Department of Finance under contribution agreements to find ways to bring NGO supportive training up to a higher standard than what we're currently offering them, which is, one-offs from time to time. So in other words, allowing the minister to get a second there. So in other words, I'm just trying to create an opportunity and foster better training and skills so we can help de-escalate violence in shelters. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Illinois Centre. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think that we're starting to cross paths between different departments, whether it's EIA and the Premier's shop, where I know they are doing a significant amount of work in terms of supporting our NGO sector in the Northwest Territories, obviously EC and Department of Finance from the Human Resources perspective. Let me answer briefly and say anything's possible. Whether I'm going to be able to commit on the floor to a program that's rolled out in Saskatchewan, probably not. But certainly can commit to looking at that program and seeing whether there are elements or aspects of it that, again, as together with my colleagues, we can utilize and employ and advance here. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. Oral questions. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Network. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know the minister has identified that the medical travel policy will be reviewed. Can the minister identify a timeline for reviewing the policy? Thank you.
Member from Nunavut Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the timeline of the medical travel policy, because of the enormous amount of work that's going to take and collaboration and consultation in the Northwest Territories when we start, may take, it could take the life of this government to get it right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I like the words "get it right." I'm glad that myself and the minister are on the same page there. So then, Mr. Speaker, my assumption then is during the review that the minister will be engaging with the public as well, obviously as Indigenous governments, with this process. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Nunavut Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I spoke specifically to youth that are living in Edmonton, going to school in Edmonton under the age of 19 and not having the ability to get an escort to come down to attend medical appointments with them, whether that be a CT scan or an MRI or things that often we're sent to Edmonton for. So I guess my question is, can the minister commit to revising Section 6.2 to recognize that a minor under the 19 years of age requires an escort or is provided an escort upon request? Thank you.
Member for Nunavut Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've committed to reviewing the entire medical travel policy and looking at all the different things, and I think that is important. But the other part of it is we hear the concerns, and this is not. I was on the other side, and I raised many concerns on medical travel. But the understanding of the different programs that medical travel is, so if we're looking for an escort, if they are NIHB, then that doesn't fall, the escort criteria doesn't fall upon N.W.T to approve that exception. If theirs doesn't fall exactly. If it's N.W.T, then there's the appeals process that appeals can go in. And then there's other insurances that also cover people that are traveling down for medical travel. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do understand that. And again, the concern is, had the student been living, say, in Inuvik and had required to be escorted out, then there would be an escort provided. There wouldn't be an issue. They would go out, both the student, and I know the minister is a mother, so she would, if she had an 18-year-old getting a CT scan, she'd probably likely to be there and not trust the 18-year-old to get the information he's required to get, or he or she is required to get from that doctor. So So I guess my question is then, can the minister explain whether there's any expectation that departmental staff have a conversation with the family before making the decision on escort requirements, Mr. Speaker?
Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can't speak to individual cases that are throughout the territory, and Inuvik being so small that I wouldn't want to speak to individually making a decision. Our medical travel policy is to assist patients from the Northwest Territories to travel, and I hear the member that if the member is away at college, then the travel is already there, and I hear what the member is saying, and yes, I am a mother, and I've traveled many times that I've paid my own way because of a lot of things, and I'm still covering some costs for some travel. But the instance is not everybody, there are circumstances, and that's why I said there are appeals, there are other ways to look at it, and and if this was an ongoing issue, or was the other thing is that if it didn't generate in the territory as well, and it was generated outside the territory for certain things, then the medical travel policy doesn't even apply, so then there's no escort policy. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions, member from Mophie.
Thank you. Questions for the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, last May in the N.W.T response to motion 75-19(2), maximum allowable rent increase for private rental units, the government stated that the Department of Justice was going to undertake a review of the Residential Tenancy Act during the 20th Assembly. Can the Minister of Justice provide a timeline for when the departmental review of the Residential Tenancy Act will take place? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Mophie. Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, this is something that is in our business plan. The review will be done within the next 12 months. Thank you.
Minister of Justice. Member from Mophie.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, can the minister share how extensive that review will be and explain what sorts of changes will be considered? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Mophie. A couple of questions. Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to provide some more information to the member in written form about how extensive we are looking at the review as of today. I'm not quite sure where things are in the process, but I can commit to provide that to her. And some of the things that I know will be considered are the recommendations made by the rental officer in their annual report, and those will go back a number of years. So there's many recommendations already that the department will be looking at. Thank you.
Justice. Oral questions. Member for Mophie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the minister explain what the concerns that the department has or that the government has overall regarding the potential negative impacts that rent control may impose on the private housing market? Thank you.
Minister of Justice.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So this did come up in the last Assembly, as the member mentioned. I was at that time the Minister of Justice as well. And when the topic of rent control came up, when there was a motion in the House, we heard from industry and we heard their concerns. And we heard about the uncertainty that something like rent control brings to investment. And so one of the things that I want to do in this government is bring more certainty to our policies, processes, laws, and regulations to help attract investment. And so what we need to do to lower the cost of rent is to address the demand and the supply issues that we're facing. So we need more homes, we need more apartments, we need more houses, we need more homes across the entire housing continuum. And somebody has to build those homes. They're not all going to be N.W.T social housing. We need a significant number of market units as well, and we are reliant on the private industry to build those. And so I want to provide assurances to the private industry that we are not going to put roadblocks up that would prevent them from being certain of their investments. Thank you.
Minister Justice. Final supplementary, member from Opay.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the answer. With that in mind, with what he just said, can the minister commit to making rent control regime included or part of the Residential Tenancy Act? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Opay. Minister Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the member knows my answer based on what I just said, but no, I cannot make that commitment. During the review of the Residential Tenancies Act, there will be opportunities for public feedback, and we will take that feedback and we will fully consider it. And so I expect that some of that feedback will be around rent control. Thank you.
Oral questions. Member for Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are for the Minister of ECC. Can the Minister update this Assembly on the latest situation with Suncor reporting runoff water testing above compliance parameters, which include rough timelines as to when more information will be available, and if residents downstream from this incident in the South Slave region have to take any precautions? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Toonaday-Willity, Minister for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on June 9th, Suncor was notified that a routine preliminary lab test results on one of the discharge ponds was outside the company approval parameters. As a result of this, there was a notification that was identified through our transboundary water agreement, and the current situation is we are additional testing is underway to validate the original test results, and we anticipate that we should receive those slowly, and they will be shared once available. And at this time, no additional action is required from residents downstream of the release. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1998, Mackenzie Valley Resource Management Act was created, which gave way to the Mackenzie Valley Land and Water Board and Mackenzie Valley Impact Review Board. In Yukon, they have the ESSA Board. In Nunavut, they have the NERB Board. Alberta, they have the Environmental and Protection and Enhancement Act and the Alberta Water Act. Mr. Speaker, my question will be, can the minister work with the federal government to work on new legislation to protect residents in the Northwest Territories as downstream users from development in Alberta? Thank you.
Member from Toonaday-Willity, Minister for ECC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are currently work being done within Alberta and with the federal minister from ECCC in regards to guiding regulations around release of tailings waters from the oil sands projects, and the Department of Environment and Climate Change is engaged in those discussions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of ECC. Oral questions. Member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At what point in time are we going to start continuing to get more information like this as downstream users here in Northwest Territories? In my riding, we have high cancer rates, and we got to figure a way this one out where Alberta consults with the government of Northwest Territories. We already do it through an agreement we have with Alberta. We do it through the Impact Review Board, but at the same time, Alberta doesn't include us in their approval process as they go through the environment assessment for those projects. So I'm wondering, can we continue to build new relationships with Government Canada to build new legislation to oversee to make sure that our interests in downstream users in Northwest Territories are protected? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Toonaday-Willity, Minister ECC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, that work is currently underway both at the federal level as well as within the province of Alberta. There were questions that were raised by the government of the Northwest Territories through environment and climate change, to which we've had responses from the Alberta government in relations to release of water from the tailings ponds. We're currently evaluating some of the responses and will be continuing that conversation on those proposed changes to legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of ECC. Final supplementary, member from Trinity-Willowdale.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that we got this notice from Alberta, and it's coming to the hands of you as a minister, and sharing that with the House here today, how do we prevent further spills like this in Alberta, and what can we do different on the interim basis until new legislation comes out? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Trinity-Willowdale. Minister, ECC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we don't have control over activities that happen within Alberta. I'm very pleased to stand up and say that the transboundary water agreement that Alberta and the Northwest Territories have was activated as outlined within that agreement. So the notification was timely. In response to that notification by the Department of Environment Climate Changes, we responded quickly to get that information out to the Indigenous governments as well as the communities across the Northwest Territories. And we will continue to relay that information as updates come to the department to ensure that everyone is kept up to speed, and if there are any significant changes, there will be that notification. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Environment and Climate Change. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are for the Minister of Housing. So as it stands now, the N.W.T Development Limited Corporation in Fort Good Hope is contracted by Housing N.W.T to deliver the maintenance and repair programs within the community. Does Housing N.W.T see other opportunities to tie in and support efforts in Fort Good Hope as they strive to take back more control over both construction and maintenance of housing in the community? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yellowknife North, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Housing N.W.T sees many opportunities with the Fort Good Hope, with the Kasho-Gotne Housing Society. We're happy to report that Housing N.W.T has a really good working relationship with the Housing Societies and has had multiple contracts in place for the delivery of maintenance and repair programs for private homes in the most recent years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does Housing N.W.T see opportunities to support this kind of concept of a housing construction centre in other N.W.T communities besides Fort Good Hope? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T.
I think this opportunity that has been driven by the local housing society is a really great opportunity that all communities should consider, and Housing N.W.T came forward as a partner in assisting them with the application for the funding allocation that they recently received. So this is a possibility in all ridings and all communities. It's just that the work has to be done in partnership with Housing N.W.T, but also locally. They have to be driven by the work. So the possibility is there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister for Housing, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So to what extent does Housing N.W.T issue its maintenance and repair contracts to local development corporations and businesses like it does in Fort Good Hope, in other communities in the territory, as opposed to issuing those kinds of contracts to contractors from outside the region or outside the territory? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T.
Housing N.W.T with our results is approximately 95% of all contracting opportunities go to local or N.W.T businesses. We follow the N.W.T procurement policy, and we also follow the business incentive policy. Housing N.W.T has local housing organizations in 23 communities, which each have their own local staff leading maintenance and repair work on housing assets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T. Final supplementary. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to that end, to increase local capacity, how many people who have gone through the Housing N.W.T apprenticeship program have actually been Journey certified? And what is Housing N.W.T doing to ensure this number is increasing even more rapidly in coming years? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Yellowknife North, Minister responsible for Housing N.W.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is critical work that we have to do throughout the North. We have to gain capacity. We have to build capacity in our communities. And these need to be local people and local jobs. That's how we're going to do it. And this is how we're going to build, like the North, is working locally and having that local capacity. So the work that Housing N.W.T does in partnership with education, culture, and employment is critical work that we have to do going forward. And over the last number of years, Housing N.W.T with the local housing associations has supported 64 apprenticeships over the last number of years. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Responsible for Housing N.W.T. Oral questions. Oral questions. Written questions. Written questions. Returns to written questions. Returns to written questions. Replies to the Commissioner's address. Replies to the Commissioner's address. Petitions. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to present a petition dealing with the matter of improved fertility and family planning supports in the Northwest Territories. Mr. Speaker, the petition contains a total of 368 signatures collected on change.org. Of those signatures, 189 are from residents of the Northwest Territories, and Mr. Speaker, the petitioners request that the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories direct the Minister of Finance to work within a whole-of-government approach to investigate the following: the impacts to the territory of a declining birth rate and how it may impact population growth, the increased demand for fertility treatments for individuals and families to conceive in the Northwest Territories, and the feasibility of providing fertility treatments at no upfront cost to the Government of the Northwest Territories by providing a territorial tax credit for individuals undergoing fertility treatments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Petitions. Petitions. Reports on committee on the review of bills. Reports of committees on review of bills. Reports on standing and special committees. Reports on standing and special committees. Tabling of documents. Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following two documents: interactivity transfers exceeding $250,000, April 1st to March 31st of 2024, and follow-up letter for oral question 170-20, bracket 1, regulation of e-scooters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Finance. Tabling of documents. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table two documents today: a letter dated June 11th, 2024 from Fertility Matters Canada regarding the case for support regarding the case for support for fertility and family building care in the Northwest Territories, and a survey by the Midwives Association of the N.W.T titled N.W.T Residents' Opinions on Midwifery 2024. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Great Slave. Tabling of documents. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to table a statement of consistency for Bill 8-20, brackets 1, an act to amend the Student SFA Act. And I'll just say the final statement in it notes it complies with Section 35, which is very important. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
to member from Illinois Centre. Tabling the documents, tabling the documents. Notice of motion. Notice of motion. Motions. The only member from Illinois Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas the rate of violent crime is on the rise in the Northwest Territories, and whereas the RCMP have publicly acknowledged the link between drugs and unprecedented homicides in the Northwest Territories, and whereas the RCMP have publicly stated they appear to be the only resource to deal with mental health emergencies, and whereas the RCMP responding to a mental health crisis is time-consuming and uses significant valuable RCMP resources that could be managed by a worker trained to respond to mental health crisis. And whereas support for the Northwest Territories trained social workers through Aurora College mental health and addictions education programming that emphasizes on skills that help those deal with mental health crises and challenges can be an opportunity to help Northerners helping Northerners. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the member for Range Lake, that the Government of the Northwest Territories work in collaboration with the RCMP to implement a crisis intervention team through a partnership that supports the response to mental health emergencies at an appropriate staff level in order to maintain 24/7 support. And furthermore, the purpose of the crisis intervention workers is to enhance the response and reduce police contact in mental health related emergencies and allow the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to focus their efforts on disrupting the drug trade in the Northwest Territories. And furthermore, that the Government of the Northwest Territories provide a response to this motion in 120 days. Thank you.
Member from Illinois Centre. To the motion. Member from Illinois Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues for having this motion and certainly supporting it to get it at least to this phase of the process. That said, Mr. Speaker, I've spoken at length about how important our RCMP are, and that's absolutely true, and I'll never change that, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, I'll also say that the RCMP, as they've acknowledged in this motion, and they've said themselves, you know, they're not social workers, and sometimes when the call comes in and they're the only one answering the phone, they cannot unanswer that phone. They can't let it ring and hope somebody else will take it. It's unfortunate, but the situation is that they are the last person to call, and they can't turn around and say, call somebody else. So they end up showing up at many calls that aren't typically orientated on the type of service they are. I mean, there's a saying, as they say, if you're a hammer, all you see is nails. Well, police officers are police officers to fight crime. I don't classify most of these mental health challenges as true crime. I think some people are in distress. Some of these situations are dynamic and fluid. They don't require a police officer. But unfortunately, if you call the police, you're going to get a police response. The nature of this motion really is saying things like, we want different type of people to talk to people. And we want people to talk to people. We want social workers, as an example, to work with someone who's in some type of distress. I mean, showing up with cuffs and a truck and all of the other tools and utilities is the wrong impression when someone is having a difficult time. There isn't time and place for those types of responses, absolutely. The stat given, I even highlighted it today in a different type of process in my member statement where I pointed out 2,268 calls to shelters over a 2-year window only resulted in 3% in actual charges. Again, that reaffirms or underscores the fact that the police really aren't there to respond to police-related emergencies. Again, they're probably called because of different challenges, shelters, and different types of situations where it's difficult to manage, and they have no one else to call for help. Hence, they call the RCMP. My heart goes out to the job and sometimes the thankless job that they do. But you know, if they're called because someone's not allowed in because shelters reach its capacity, it's after hours, and they can't let them in. I mean, when the police are called, that's not a crime. I mean, it's a crime they can't get in and stay warm. It's truly a crime that they have nowhere to go. That's the real crime. But I mean, when we call the police officer to show up, they have to put it on the books that they have a call. All they do is, all the public sees is the police officer is picking up someone who probably just need somewhere to go. And I'm actually feeling frustrated saying this stuff, Mr. Speaker. I mean, you know, this is awful. You know, they don't like to wear these statistics. You know, as a matter of fact, you know, I get the feeling that, you know, they feel very uncomfortable that they have to respond to these types of calls. But when they pick someone up in a condition that can't enter the shelter, and, you know, we know addictions consumes a lot of people and a lot of families in terrible ways, but when they have to pick someone up, the resources are tied up with that individual because they just can't drop them off at the hospital. The hospital won't take them if they're in a very difficult state. In other words, the conditions of the addictions are managing their current situation. They can't drop them off down the street and say, hey, we'll just drop you off in this area and be good, right? No, they can't. They have to take full carriage of that individual until they're able to manage themselves, or their safety is no longer at risk, or the public safety is no longer at risk. So ultimately, Mr. Speaker, it frustrates me seeing this happen. It frustrates me knowing sometimes we just have nowhere for them to go. And again, maybe that's the crisis here. You know, it's a multifaceted issue, and I have every belief that the government can help rise to this challenge. We're never going to solve all the problems, but we certainly have to chip away at them. And that's what I always say when I'm here being relentless. Like, I'm relentless. I don't care how many times you say no, I'll keep coming back because I'm fighting for that one yes. And that one yes builds to two, and two yeses build to three, and all of a sudden we're changing the nature of our community. So, Mr. Speaker, I get a really burning feeling inside and frustration and upset every time I think about that this is the way society currently thinks is best to manage people. I think it's probably almost the worst way to manage people. And I even mentioned it in committee one day, like I would throw myself in front of the police door, not allow someone to say, well, we don't know where to put them, let's put them in an open door cell. Like, that is the worst place to put people in crisis and trouble. They need somewhere to go. So not only this speaks to, we have to find better ways to work with people, we have to find better ways to help people. And that's really what it's saying in different ways. And I know the government knows this, and I know the minister knows this, and I know the minister cares about these things, and there's no comment here that the government doesn't care, and there's certainly no comment here that, you know, they ignore this issue. It's just we now have to find a new way of doing business. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'll leave that what I've said so far is to open up discussion. I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing what my colleagues will say. But this truly is an issue throughout the territory, not just here. And lest I forget, I'll make sure I ask for a recorded vote now so it's not forgotten. But I look for the opportunity, like I said, to hear my colleagues and their struggles and maybe even their solutions to this particular issue. And I'll close out debate at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Centre. To the motion, member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise in support of this motion and to second it. I think there's an interesting debate going on, as my colleague alluded to, in the Northwest Territories right now, of how best to resolve the increasing rates of crime in our communities and addictions and substance abuse. And I think, unfortunately, this discussion turns into a binary of either you support more policing or you support more addictions, and you can't do both at the same time. And I think you can, I know, because I certainly do, and speaking with our police services as well, they certainly do, that you can address a public health crisis at the same time as you address an organized crime crisis and a drug trafficking crisis. But you need different resources to do that, and that's what this motion calls for. And specifically, one thing we're missing is a community policing-based support. I want to commend the N.W.T for working on building something like this in Fort Liard with their Community Safety Officer pilot program. I hope we can see more of those roll out across the Northwest Territories, and I think that would be an appropriate model for what this motion contemplates. We have to allow the police to do police work and create the kind of resources that can do this kind of work. The statistics are not good. I don't think anyone who's unhoused or who is suffering from addictions and the issues that relate to that I don't think they want to be dealing with the police. I think they'd much rather have a more supportive, trained, well-trained professional who can get them into programs that can help support them. But when you're dealing with armed thugs, that's not a situation for a social worker either, and I don't think social workers want to be in that situation. So, we need all the resources to bear to address this crisis, and I think this motion is a good way to give voice to what many people have been calling for, which is a different approach that isn't the heavy hammer of the police, so everyone can get back to doing what they do best and tackle the areas of this multifaceted problem that they're best equipped to deal with. So I support this motion, encourage other members of the House to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Range Lake. To the motion. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I appreciate the idea and the intent behind this motion. I'm not sure how this would look in practice. In particular, I think this would look quite different in each different community in the Northwest Territories. And I actually think the solution needs to be a partnership that goes beyond just the N.W.T and the RCMP. I think there's many other partners who are on the front lines of trying to support and deal with mental health emergencies. The member for Yellowknife Centre talked repeatedly about the fact that people need somewhere else to go, as opposed to being, I guess, taken to jail. And the problem is that we still don't have somewhere else for them to go. And this motion doesn't actually take us in that direction per se. And, in Yellowknife, we have the street outreach van, which live and work in the downtown area that, thank goodness for the street outreach van. It's an essential service, but the street outreach van has identified time and time again that a big problem is that they're a van, but often they don't have anywhere to actually take people who need help. They can transport them somewhere, but there is nowhere to take them if, the shelters are full, if the sobering center is full, if the day shelter is full. And so that remains a big problem. And so, we have a review that's happening of the street outreach program that the city has led. And I've been happy to see that N.W.T staff have been able to participate in that review. I am anxious to see the report that comes out of that and the recommendations. I would urge this government to look at those recommendations seriously, to follow up, to commit resources to work with the City of Yellowknife in ensuring that we have appropriate, responses when people are going through mental health crisis or, struggling and they're on the street and someone needs to respond, but I agree, it shouldn't be the police. And so we need a more comprehensive service. We also need a sort of more comprehensive net of supports that are going to be able to help people beyond just being the first person to intervene in that crisis. We need the follow-up supports and services that's going to allow them to move past that crisis. So I will support the motion, but I would urge the government in its response to carefully consider the review and recommendations coming out of the report on the street outreach program and building on current initiatives that are underway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North. To the motion. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll just speak to the motion briefly, Mr. Speaker. I do support this motion. I think it's another tool. It's a step in the right direction. I think, our goal is to disrupt the flow of drugs coming into our territory, at our borders, in our communities, and also to help those who are suffering from the consequences of those drugs, Mr. Speaker. So So, I mean, I listened to the statements from my other colleagues, and I concur. And certainly, there are, we need to keep moving forward to things like addiction treatment centres and aftercare programs. But I do think this is a tool starting in the right direction. I want RCMP to be RCMP, and I want them, doing what RCMP do, which is catching the bad people that are in this territory doing the bad things. And we need to also focus on the people that are suffering, as I said, from the consequences of those bad things. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from N.W.T. To the motion. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly won't need 20 minutes to speak on this one. I am supportive of similar to kind of some previous speakers, I'm supportive of the general intent of this motion, though I don't think the details, implications, and a full understanding of how it can be successfully implemented have been thought out at this time. However, I would note that there are several models already being implemented in neighboring jurisdictions, so we can learn from and borrow from their experience. Mr. Speaker, the Yukon has a program like this. There's programs in numerous cities across North America, so I would just encourage the government in responding to this motion to do research to ensure that any solutions brought forward are evidence-based, as I'd like to emphasize for virtually everything that we do, and just ensure that we are putting solutions in place which are right-sized for our territory, for our communities, and which we have seen through investigations into evidence that they will be effective and not have negative unintended consequences. Mr. Speaker, I do want to kind of acknowledge that a large percentage of calls fielded by RCMP are non-criminal matters, and that's something that I heard a lot from the RCMP when I was on council. They would come and present to us often, and probably one of the most impactful meetings I had was with a previous head of the RCMP that came to council and actually asked us for a meeting in private to encourage us to invest in social services and invest in social solutions to so many of the problems that we see manifesting on the streets, because his message to us is simply that we are not going to police our way out of this problem. And coming from the head of the RCMP, that was a really powerful message that I have kept in mind going forward in the work that I do in governance. So I want to emphasize that a lot of the calls that RCMP are receiving are non-criminal matters, and they are better handled by our social services and healthcare providers. So this is not just limited to mental health crises. So I just want to note, I'm not going to list everything, but let's be expansive in our considerations for implementation of a program like this. Let's ensure that, again, I just emphasize the need for evidence-based policy making and decision making. So I'll leave my comments at that. I do support the general intent of the motion, and for that reason I'll stand in support of it today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Frame Lake. To the motion. Member from Great Slate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll keep this short and brief. I do agree with the intent of the motion, and I agree with much of what my colleagues have said here today, and I will be happy to support the motion. I think it's very important, as my colleague from Yellowknife North stated, that this will look different in every community. I think that this is currently framed in a sort of Yellowknife-centric sort of way, so I hope that in the government's reply we can have that fulsome breadth of a reply for what it might look like in some of our smaller communities as well. I would also like to point out something that I heard from my colleague from Yellowknife North, that there is a lack of places to go when the shelters are freed up, but thankfully here in Yellowknife we have a wellness and recovery center on the books for the life of this assembly, and I am thrilled that that is happening, Mr. Speaker, so I would love to see the response incorporate that. And that's about all I have right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Great Slate. To the motion. Member from Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too think about and heard all the comments from the members. I will support this motion, but I would like the departments to look at how this will roll out in the small communities. It's good for us because we get another job. Looks like there would be crisis intervention workers. So, and just to know how it's going to work in combination with health and social services, RCMP, that needs to be looked at. Otherwise, I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, member from the date show. To the motion, member from Slot 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too will be supporting this motion. Anything to do with the facing the challenges and the problems. Just recently, in the last number of hours, I've received a couple of calls that there's many drugs coming into the Satu as we speak. So it's a continued crisis, and the problems that are being seen in public, it's terrible. So it's a terrible situation, and we need all the tools in the toolbox to move ahead. And if this is going to be an added solution to the crisis that's out there, yes, I will support that. Mussy.
Thank you, member from the Slot 2. To the motion, member from Trinidad-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too support this motion. It's another toolbox that we need to deal with the issues in our small communities and throughout the Northwest Territories. And I respect my colleagues on their comments as well. And I hear, I'm hoping that that within 120 days, this issues will be addressed. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Trinidad-Willity. To the motion, member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too will be supporting this motion because in my community of Fort McPherson, I've seen the resource people, specifically the RCMP, have been exhausted to where they're unable to come out to investigate any crimes because they're not trained or to go out and deal with family violence or any other family issues. So this motion will give direction to the government to help these resource people in a better manner. So just to let you know that I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Mackenzie Delta. To the motion, member from Hay River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members may recall that I have already spoken on this topic, and I've stated that this is the direction that I would like to see things move. The RCMP, as has been stated, should be dealing with crimes, not with mental health issues, but they have become the default service provider in that area. And so while I know there might be hopes of 24/7 support in every community around the territory, I don't want anyone to get their hopes up that we're going to have around-the-clock services like that anytime soon with 3 shifts in every community, 99 social workers working around the clock. But that being said, I've had discussions with the RCMP on this. I've communicated to my department that I want to see us move in this direction. And so regardless of this motion, work is beginning. Thank you. Oh, and Mr. Speaker, microphone is still on, so I will say that as always, Cabinet would like to take our 120 days to respond to this motion. When something like this comes in, there's a lot of things to consider, and we want to make sure that we take that time and fully consider it and then provide a response. So we will be abstaining. Thank you.
Member from Hay River North. To the motion. To conclude the motion, member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, I want to thank all the committee members on this side of the House for their very rich and important and thoughtful comments. Mr. Speaker, a couple of them I want to highlight. First of all, I'll start with the member on my left for Range Lake. These are types of issues on his agenda, constantly raising them with committee, trying to support community members You know, and I often hear him say he recognizes the Mackenzie Delta member who's dealing with his challenges in his community. I hear the member from N.W.T talk about the community impacts that drugs and alcohol are having, and we have to find different ways of doing this. Mr. Speaker, we could talk about every member, but I think the member of Dutcho said it's an important creation of resources in their community, and she'd like to see the rollout of this in smaller communities, and I couldn't support it any more than that. I do fully agree. Mr. Speaker, crime is changing, and we have to respond to it differently, and I hate the situation where we treat all crime the same, because social issues aren't crime. And unhoused and addictions are not crime in my view. I mean, and you know, we can talk about that till the cows go home, but the truth is I really don't believe that unhoused and addictions in any way is a crime. It's a crime not doing anything, and I know it's tough to solve all solutions, I want to stress that, but by doing nothing, I think is truly the crime. So, Mr. Speaker, this, as many members have recognized, it's a tool. A recognized MLA for Frame Lake had pointed out there are models and options out there. I'll be the first to say, don't just go by the option I'm presenting today. I'll say if there's a workable option to find ways, take it. It's not about, sometimes debate isn't about trying to win, Mr. Speaker, and I refer to win an argument. It's about trying to find the best solution. And sometimes we get caught up hypersensitive about raising our voice and getting engaged in issues. But really, debate should be, and arguments should be, about how do we get the best result. And that's what hopefully this is really about, getting the best result for all ridings, by all means. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll close with thanking everyone, and I also want to thank the Premier in his comments. It sounded like he fully supported the motion, and I'm sure that's what I heard, and I'll have to go back to Hansard to confirm that one way or the other, so I'll do that on my own time. But that said, I was really, we were all moved by his wonderful statements in support of these types of ideas. So, Mr. Speaker, I've already asked for a recorded vote, and I'll leave it at that. And again, I thank everyone for hearing this out and sharing today. Thank you.
From Milne Centre. To the motion. Question. Question has been called. The member from Milne Centre has asked for a recorded vote. For those all in favor, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife Centre, the member for Range Lake, the member for N.W.T Lake, the member for Montfouille, the member for Frame Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Tunide-Willowday, the member for Dutcho, the member for N.W.T.
All those opposed, please stand. All those abstaining, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife South, the member for Cam Lake, the member for Hay River North, the member for Hay River South, the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Nunavut.
Colleagues, 11 in favor, 0 opposed, 7 abstention. Motion has passed. Motions. Member from Milne Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whereas local authorities are currently responsible for the development and implementation of their emergency plans, and whereas the local emergency plan is the first line of defense to keep residents of the Northwest Territories safe and informed when responding to natural disasters or other similar emergencies, and whereas Municipal and Community Affairs currently provides guidance to local authorities to create emergency plans, but there is no requirement for the Minister to fund, draft, or assess these plans. And whereas the current form of community emergency plans throughout municipal and community governments can fairly be described as standalone orphan plans, and whereas without general uniformity of emergency plans, there is little consistency with respect to community emergency plan details, themes, and overlapping partnership agreements, which would help ensure the plans coordinate together in cases of regional needs and consistent contiguous to the Northwest Territories emergency management plans. And whereas there is currently no obligation for public transparency of these community emergency plans, And whereas residents in the Northwest Territories communities were threatened as they fled for safety in recent flooding and wildfire events, and in some cases felt a sense of lack of coordination and disconnect between leadership and partners. And whereas the Minister has the authority under the Act to direct a review and analyze these plans, however, the Department does not fund these plans directly, which is left up to the municipal community government to resolve this challenge in absence of much needed resources, expertise, and funding. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the member for Tunaday-Welladay, that Municipal and Community Affairs direct the Emergency Management Organization to draft all emergency plans for every Northwest Territories community over the next 2 years to ensure all plans are reasonably and consistently done. And furthermore, that the Minister in Community Affairs provide financial support to all applicable governments to allow them to fine-tune and complete their specific community emergency plan reflective of their specific community needs, inventorying of assets and assessment of their partners and supports. And furthermore, once a community plan is prepared, the Municipal and Community Affairs posts each community emergency plan on the Municipal and Community Affairs website to ensure they are publicly accessible for transparency. And furthermore, that the Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs acquire the resources for each community to ensure all plans are reviewed and practiced from time to time based on reasonable industry standards, which will demonstrate leadership and confidence in these safety plans for all Northwest Territories residents. And furthermore, that the Government of the Northwest Territories provide a response to this motion in 120 days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife Centre. To the motion. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to kick off debate as I did earlier, but I probably won't spend as much time going through this one. This motion speaks for itself. Communities, whether you live in a large one or a small one, are all starved for resources. We've talked about the municipal funding gap at length, and this is just one more thing piled onto them that they need to respond to. Mr. Speaker, the challenge is, of course, we know first of all it's money. So the resource of money is not there for these communities. Then you have the skills and abilities to do this. I mean, these are specialized expertise. This motion really does talk to the issue of MACA coordinating them for all communities, and then looking at them from a regional point of view and then tying them together so they're consistent, and then giving them the communities, all communities, in a draft form, so then they can say, hey, my needs in Trout Lake are way different than my needs in Colville Lake, or my needs in Inuvik are much different than Yellowknife, or my needs are different in Smith than they are in Norman Wells. So like every community is very different, but the concept and the expertise about asking the important questions such as make sure you have this, make sure you know where these are, not considering this an enormous undertaking, but it's the financial and expertise that, when it comes to the money and know-how to build these things and give them to communities, we have to set these communities up for success. And that's the critical part about this, is leading and coordinating these initiatives and then giving them to the individual communities and say, hey, this is important to me, these are our key resources, these are our partners, we agree with this. If they don't want the draft plan, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't stand in the way of a community that says, we don't want the draft plan. I mean, but the thing is, they got to go it alone then, and I don't want to see that. I want them to work in partnership. This is about collaboration and leadership, and it takes leadership from the Department of Municipal and Community Affairs to help support and initiate these processes so they're ready, so they're done in a timely way, so we're not waiting too long. I mean, the complaints about our plans there, why are they different? Why are they missing things? I mean, this would help resolve some of those issues and resolve confidence in our northern concerns, which is my region, is my community ready? If it is ready, what does ready mean? And what does ready look like? What does it sound like? How does it trigger? What triggers this? How do we respond? So that's the kind of concept here. I should stress, it's not intended to force this on anybody, and that's not the intent of this motion. So if anyone feels that their community, this would force it, this is not. It's meant about working in collaboration. And the bottom line is it's about MACA picking up the tab, which really it belongs to, rather than on the individual citizens on that. So whether you live, I mean, where do you get extra money when you live in Fort Providence? It's not sitting around there. That community government's struggling to keep water moving in those streets and, you know, doing the important things that communities do. There used to be an old slaying, dogs, ditches, and dumps. That's what communities should be focusing on, you know, the infrastructure of towns. But as times move on, processes become heavier and heavier. They give them more and more to do. And MACA says, this is important, you must have these things. Well, when you say these things are important, they must be done, they must be funded too. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the start-off discussion. I look forward to the insights and ideas and suggestions my community members have. I'm open to them, and I certainly think that they would be helpful in any form to help get this motion through with the intent of this is about supporting communities, which ultimately is supporting people and making sure we're safe. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, of course, I'll be asking for a recorded vote, so I might as well let that know, the public know now. Cheers.
Nominally Centre. To the motion, member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this motion. On May 5th, 2022, the community, or the Hamlet Fort resolution was taken over by MACA. And since March of this year, I've been asking where's the fire plan and where things are at. And also in regards to the fire plan for N.W.T and N.W.T. And but with this whole year, you know, I thought about it and thinking back of 2023 and the fire season that we went through, and we want to go back and learn from that. But for me, when I stand up before this house here and I brought this issue up about the fire plan, it's really tough because we're under third-party management for resolution, and it's really tough because you know, the SEO is I've been talking to that office for when I got there and trying to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? I get calls from the chief, I get calls from the Métis leaders saying, okay, well, we're concerned about the fire and the upcoming fire season in 2024. So, you know, most definitely, you know, we do need help. I know in N.W.T and N.W.T, you know, they took it upon themselves to come up with some kind of plan to fire guard the community so that we don't have another situation we found ourselves in last year. So this idea of putting this together costs money, and small community, untax-based communities such as N.W.T and N.W.T is very tough. We already have limited dollars. Our CPI dollars that we get are earmarked for other projects in the community, and I'm getting tired to hear that, well, just use your CPI dollars. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, in Kakiza and the Enterprise, my heart goes out to that community because they found themselves in a very awkward position last year, and the fire just took off, and especially in the Enterprise where, you know, a lot of residents there that don't have insurance or anything that they want to leave the Northwest Territories because, you know, had we got on that fire and earlier, we wouldn't be in that situation, and we would have residents in Enterprise with homes. But now they don't have insurance, and that makes my heart goes out to them. In fact, my heart says that the Minister of Housing and MACA should step up and try to deal with this issue, so that, you know, we can look at the houses for the members in that riding. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, is that we need a plan, especially a communication plan. When you hear the mayor of Fort Providence driving down the road to Kakiza to alert them about the upcoming fire in that area, and we had no phone, and they were caught off guard, and so that's why we need to have a very good plan, and this motion that we have in front of us is just a way to try to come together to come up with a plan that's going to be good for my four communities and to all the communities in Northwest Territories. But the thing is that the communities don't have the money as well. So, Mr. Speaker, because of that, I am supporting this motion. Thank you. Merci.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a friendly amendment to bring forward for this, which I'll speak to after reading the motion into the record. I move, seconded by the member for Great Slave, that motion 35-20 sub 1, emergency plan support for municipalities and community governments, be amended by replacing the word direct with the word offer, adding S to the word organization, followed by adding the word assistance, and adding in need of assistance after the words Northwest Territories community in the 9th paragraph of the motion.
Member from Frame Lake.
Opposed to saying we're going to direct the emergency management organization to do these plans on behalf of. It'll simply give communities the option. I think we need to be careful not to take autonomy away from our communities when we're passing motions such as this, so that we ensure that our communities still hold their decision-making authority. So in the words, I'll just quote the Mayor Alty of the City of Yellowknife on this one. As a policy principle, I don't want to regress into the time when the N.W.T came in and did everything for communities and we didn't have a say. We are an order of government with responsibilities, and we are able to do them when we are provided the adequate resources. So I think this motion is, the motion as a whole, as amended, if the amendment passes, is about getting communities those resources. And so insofar as that is the intent, then I do support it. And so, yeah, the amendment is just to remove the wording and put the decision-making back in the community's hands as to whether they would like support drafting the emergency plans, as opposed to saying it has to be done. Thank you, Mr. And I would appreciate the support of my colleagues in moving this amendment forward. Thank you.
Member from Yellowknife Centre. To the amendment, member from Great Slave.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I don't have much to say to add to my colleague from Frame Lake, aside from the fact that it is important that our municipalities have the ability to fully realize what they want to do and the way they want to do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Great Slave. To the amendment, member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to save a lot of time by saying I agree with the amendment, so I'm not going to oppose it. It's not exactly the direction I was going, but it speaks to the exact intent of what I was going with. So I have no problem. We should point out there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. They are amendments, and I'm pleased to accept this one. So if you want to call that friendly, that's fine too. So no problem. Thank you.
Member from Yellowknife Centre. Member from Tuna-de-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a second to the motion, I do support the amendment as well. Merci.
To the amendment. Question has been called. Show of hands, please. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion has passed. To the motion. Member from, with the amendment. Member from Range Lake.
Okay. To the motion as amended, yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think we will have to wait for the after-action review to come forward that will have more comprehensive recommendations on how we can improve the operation of the emergency management system. Inquiry or not, I think everyone supports that exercise, and it's something that we're looking forward to seeing come forward. Yesterday, I raised the issue of requiring through regulation that emergency management organizations follow a common system of command and control. These are the kind of things that the department could offer support, planning support, and that as this motion contemplates. So I think the idea of it is good. I think this is the role of a public safety department, of which MACA is responsible, but it's their role to provide that kind of support. And I think the messaging that's out there now, unintentionally, is that not that you're on your own, but it's your responsibility. and you have to go seek the resources to get it done right. And I think this is just a bit more directly explicit in showing that the department has an obligation to ensure the correct functioning of the emergency management system. They have a statutory obligation, of course, but more than just to say, yeah, you've got a report, or you've got a plan, and it's good. It's rather to take a look at it and say, well, does the plan work? Does the plan meet the needs of this community? For improving public safety, I presume that the minister will abstain, but I would like to hear his comments on this as well, because it's important that we are moving forward, and we are moving forward without delay. So I look forward to see how we respond to this, both through the after action report and through incorporating the suggestions such as this motion to improve the emergency management system in the Northwest Territories.
Here.
I will be supporting it. Thank you.
From Range Lake, to the motions as amended. To the motions as amended, Mr. Member from Hay River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cabinet will be taking the 120 days to consider the motion and responding as requested if it passes. Thank you. And we will be abstaining.
To the motion as amended, member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to speak to this one shortly. I think, just when bringing motions forward, I think sometimes the desire to get ideas onto the floor gets ahead of the work needed to fully assess the problem, engage with those affected by it, and hear their needs, and work through the necessary and often difficult process of figuring out the most effective way to address those needs. I don't believe that responsibility lies solely on the shoulders of Cabinet. We do have tools at our disposal on the regular side. We have our committees. We have an excellent team of research staff. We have the ability to engage and collaborate with ministers. We have the ability to engage with NGOs who have expertise and often a mandate on these items that we're speaking to. And we have the ability to engage with our communities, with mayors, with councillors. And it is through the effective use of these tools that members can be most effective in our work. So I am becoming concerned about the relative efficacy of individual motions as their collective volume increases. All of that said, I have been hearing from my community that funding is needed to support emergency planning, and there was a clause related to that in yesterday's motion, which I did support. I think there are definitely gaps between what communities are capable of and what MACA is saying they are responsible for, which I made a statement about earlier in this session. So on this, I think we need to hear from the N.W.T Association of Communities on what supports they need, what changes may be needed to our emergency management legislation and framework, and I do hope to hear from the N.W.T Association Communities on that. I went to their website, checked their standing motions, checked the motions that they put forward. I haven't seen a motion so far from the association on this matter, but I think they probably will have something to say on it in the future. So all of that said, I do support, again, the intent of the motion. I support the motion as amended. As I said, I put forward an amendment, and I appreciate colleagues supporting that. So I am in support of the motion. I do think that some communities are going to need help, some probably more than others. But most importantly, communities need financial assistance from the government to take on this responsibility. This is something that I think came out in a very stark way that we weren't quite prepared when big evacuations hit last summer, and we've talked about that a lot in this House already, and I think that problem is well defined at this point, and we've got after action reviews looking at it right now. But to the point, I do think assistance to communities will be helpful in this. I think financial assistance in particular is what I've heard from the mayor of my community that is needed in order to take on this responsibility effectively. So to that end, to the motion itself, I do support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, when we're talking to motions, please to the motion. I need to focus on what the motion's on the floor. Thank you. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too will be supporting this amended motion. After working on a number of job sites, safety is paramount. So now we got to think as legislators and public officers of the communities who represent community safety. With climate change so much different in various impacts over the last several years, more so than several decades ago. So given all the elements, I think we need to act as good managers and have our efficiencies in safety manuals, safety precautions, safety procedures, and this is only increasing the safety of the community and the safety of the whole community, whether the elders, middle-aged, or the children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from the Sawtoo. To the motion as amended. To the motion as amended. Final close the debate off. Member from Yonley Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, I'm going to thank and acknowledge the minister from Tune-a-Day, or sorry, the member, maybe one day, but certainly the member for Welleday Tune-a-Day for seconding the motion. He raises some really good concerns, and I fully support his. The issues he brings, which is many of these small communities are so under-resourced and they're piled on with more challenges. You know, they just have nowhere to go, and they're challenged all the way around to find ways to move dollars around just to get the job done, and yet here they are, they're so often struggling, and one could say underwater even in droughts because of responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, the intent of the motion is trying to help coordinate and support all our communities to make sure they're safe, they have plans, and with that, I'll leave it, as the motion has already spoken for itself and my colleagues have offered some valuable input, and I am grateful for their time on this initiative. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Centre. To the motion. Question has been called. The member from Yonley Centre has asked for a recorded vote. To the motion as amended. Sorry.
The member for Yellowknife Centre. The member for Range Lake. The member for N.W.T Lake, the member for Montfouille, the member for Frame Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Tune-a-Day Welleday, the member for Detcho, the member for Sawtoo.
To the motion as amended. Sorry. Any nays? No nays? I'm sorry. Abstentions to the motion as amended. Please stand.
The member for Thabatcha, the member for Yellowknife South, the member for Cam Lake, the member for Hay River North, the member for Hay River South, the member for N.W.T Twin Lakes, the member for Nunavut.
All in favor, 11. Opposed, 0. Abstention, 7. Motion has been carried. Motions. Notice the motions, first reading of bills. Notice the motion, first reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Cam Lake, that Bill 7, Miscellaneous Statute Law Amendment Act 2024, be read for the second time. This bill corrects inconsistencies and errors in the statutes of the Northwest Territories. This bill also helps deal with other matters of a minor, non-controversial, and uncomplicated nature in the statutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Thank you, Minister. The motion is in order. To the principle of the bill. Question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion has been passed. Sorry. Reading of second bill has been passed for Bill 7. Bill 8. Member for Yonley Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member for Sawtoo, that Bill 8, an act to amend the Student Financial Assistance Act, be read for a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill amends the Student Financial Assistance Act in increasing the maximum amount of money that can be loaned to a person under the Act from $60,000 to $90,000. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Yellowknife Centre. To the motion. Member from Mofwee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a Northern Indigenous born and raised in Fort Ray as shown on my birth certificate, I am proud of the Student Financial Assistance Program that we have in the Northwest Territories. I heard many times from others, it is one of the best student support programs in Canada. With the changes that the Minister of ECE put in place last Assembly, there is more support for Indigenous students, which I hope will help to improve the education outcome for students in the N.W.T, especially in small communities. The outcome is not good. My concern with this bill, with this private member's bill, Mr. Speaker, is that we are under fiscal restraint. Why under fiscal restraint are we going to increase the funding cap for student loans? Mr. Speaker, we have people in Fort Smith that will be losing 20 positions, and many of these have families and mortgages. Now some of them might have to sell their house, and if lucky enough, some of them might, if they're lucky enough, some of them might have to find an employment in Fort Smith. So, Mr. Speaker, if we are going to increase the loan cap offer under Student Financial Assistance Program, how much will this cost the JNWT? How will this impact the education outcome for Indigenous students in small communities? And why, Mr. Speaker, would we consider an increase in the funding amount provided to students without increasing the requirement to return back to the N.W.T to contribute to our economy to repay the loan? By raising the funding cap for students, we are allowing students to leave the N.W.T for longer periods of time with no incentive to return to the N.W.T and work in between their studies. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe this private member's bill is ready for review by the House. I don't believe it's necessary to increase the funding limitations. I believe we already have an excellent program that does not need adjusting at this time. In order to advance this bill, there needs to be more research and engagement done prior to introducing in this House. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, at this time, I said at this time, I will not support the motion.
To the bill. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first off, I want to say thank you to the member of Mofwee for sharing her concerns, being honest about her concerns in the sense of I respect that. And I don't have a problem that she has questions by any means. And I think this is the debate I'm talking about when, sometimes we define them as arguments and challenges and debates. But I think the important thing here to focus in on is this. That could become some of the discussion during the review after second reading, if it goes to committee and get some public feedback and maybe find out as these are, the issues raised might be some incidental ones that need to be taken care of. I want to stress the importance of the bill, and the reason it's done in this way is it's treated as, in lay terms, we're changing the credit limit of those who can borrow it. So in other words, that's what it is. The money comes from the pool within SFA, frankly, because education is more expensive today, and the cost for students pursuing further education. The expectation in the Northwest Territory, I shouldn't say the expectation, but the hope and dreams of many Northerners is that our young people will pursue further education. But, it doesn't, cost of education isn't stagnant. It's increased, it's grown, it's ballooned, it's only, the future only says it's going to cost more no matter where they go. And then we ask them to become lawyers and, take your PhD and masters, and we keep on adding layers to things, and that's all more money. That's what this is targeted at, is giving access to all Northerners. The statement The N.W.T statement pointed out that there's no restrictions on this that impede on Indigenous rights by any means. That was very important, and certainly is very important to me, and I know it's important to the member, and I recognize that, but it has no reflection of this. This is strictly raising the borrowing amount an individual Northern student can borrow if they wish to pursue their education. The other things such as return of service, etc., I mean, those are outside currently the scope of the bill, and it's just, like I said, a money bill based on saying a student wants to continue their education, they've taken a different path, they've changed their mind, and they need more access to funds. The cap is all that's changing here. As to the other issues, I would certainly be behind every one of those initiatives if we want to talk separately and find different avenues to meet them, because as I'm going to finish this, Mr. Speaker, and try to stay focused, of course, on the bill, I truly support growing education opportunities for community members. I mean, I'm from a small community. I understand the challenges there, and hence I'm deeply connected to the struggles that many of them have. So, Mr. Speaker, to the nature of the bill or to the intent of the bill, it's just to raise the credit limit so more young people can get more education, and my goal is they come back here. And my apologies, one more last thing. I think we're only talking about this affecting in the range of 20 students. That would change the world of what we're trying to bring back to the Northwest Territories of skills and abilities. Thank you.
From Yellowknife Centre. To the principle of the bill. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this motion as a seconder. It's a increase to the existing options available to the students. Some of the assistance that and that's based on cost. Everything else is going up. Hopefully we can increase the threshold in some programs we deliver. So it's an option there for the average student to take, whether they choose to do so. It's entirely up to them, but I've learned a lot of finding out through the assistance of students that I help to survey their options, and I'm quite satisfied. I would say probably more so satisfied with the programs and services offered by this government to encourage the students to complete their education. And one program that I'm quite intrigued by is the one offered by ECE, and saying to the average student, we will cover 80% of your salary as you're going to school. So that's a huge financial relief to the individual going to school. And I recently experienced a graduate that went through that program and completed and graduated in the Yukon University and is back working for this government. So that's just an example of the many options out there for assistance, whether it's bursaries or scholarships, or in this case, a loan. It's optional. They don't have to take that. We're just increasing it there to in line with the inflationary cost that keeps increasing. There must be choice.
To the principle of the bill. To the principle of the bill, member from Kamloops.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues for talking about our students, the importance of education, and also this Assembly's priority on building a strong economic foundation for our whole territory. Mr. Speaker, changes were made to the Student Financial Assistance Program in 23-24, including increases to the benefit rates for remissible loans. ECE is analyzing the impacts of the changes, including impacts to the SFA loan limits, which is expected to be completed at the end of the 24-25 academic year. Mr. Speaker, while I agree with the MLA that the student loan limit may require an increase, the analysis still needs to be done to determine the appropriate level of increase required. There may also be legislative impacts beyond the student loan limit itself. Notably, the legislated $45 million SFA revolving loan fund also needs to be reviewed, and we need to assess potential regulatory changes pertaining to repayment terms as well, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to working with the member to ensure changes to the SFA legislation account for all potential impacts and that the program meets the needs of the students, including the financial burden loans may place on them, as well as accounting for public funds. Mr. Speaker, as work is required to investigate the revolving loan fund and potential impacts, and since this is beyond what is proposed in the private member's bill, Cabinet will abstain from the vote for this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Cam Lake. To the principle of the bill. Question has been called. You just asked to call the question. Yeah. So the member from Yellowknife Centre, you spoke twice to this bill. Yes. Member from Wolfie, you can only get one chance to speak to the motion. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Thank you. Thank you.
Problem solved. Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife Centre, the member for Range Lake, the member for N.W.T Lake, the member for Tunde-Wellade, the member for Decho, the member for Satu.
Those opposed, please stand.
The member for Montfouille, the member for Frame Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Yellowknife North.
Those abstaining, please stand.
For Thabacha, the member for Yellowknife South, the member for Cam Lake, the member for Hay River North, the member for Hay River South, the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Nunavut.
Thank you, colleagues. Those in favor, 6. Opposed, 5. Abstention, 7. The bill has carried. Bill 8 has carried the second reading. Both bills now stand referred to the Standing Committee. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration in Committee of the Whole and other matters. Table document 93-20 brackets 1. Table document 111-20 brackets 1 with the member from Tunde-Wellade in the chair.
I now call committee the whole to order. What is the wish of committee? I'll go to the member from Inuvik Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the committee wishes to consider Table document 93-20, brackets 1, 2024-2025 main estimates, and table document 111-20, brackets 1, supplementary estimates, infrastructure expenditures, number 1, 2024-2025. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All departments, if I need to say that.
Thank you. Does the committee agree? Okay. Thank you. We'll take a short recess. We'll continue on. Consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters. Table documents 111-20(1). Supplementary estimates. Infrastructure expenditure number 1, 2024-2025. Committee, we have agreed to consider table documents 111-20(1). Supplementary estimates. Infrastructure expenditure number 1, 2024-2025. The committee has previously considered all lines items and had deferred final consideration of table documents. Committee, do you agree that you have concluded consideration of table documents 111-20(1), supplementary estimates, infrastructure expenditure number 1, 2024-2025? Does a member of the committee agree? Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from the Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that consideration of table document 111-20(1), supplementary estimates, infrastructure expenditures, number 1, 2024-2025, be now concluded, and that the table document 111-20(1) be reported and recommended as ready for further consideration in formal session through the form of an appropriation bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. Table documents 111-20(1) will be reported as ready for consideration in formal session through the form of an appropriation bill. Thank you, Minister, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing before us. Is that the right one? Okay. Sergeant Arms, please escort the witnesses from the. Thank you. I think it's been a long day already. Anyway, committee, we have agreed to consider table documents 93-20(1), 2024-2025 main estimates. Minister of Finance, please proceed with your open remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, consensus government is fundamentally different than a partisan system where political parties develop party platforms to deliver after an election. Having fewer cabinet ministers than regular members who form standing committees may be similar to minority government situation when it comes time to determine whether or how cabinet can seek to pass a budget or law, because there must be discussions to ensure a necessary number of votes. However, the nature and content of our discussions within a consensus government is different. The work we do in a consensus system comes back to us being here as representatives for our communities and our regions. There is give and take in these discussions, and ultimately, a balance is sought that reflects the priorities that we all set together as we address the needs that we see across the Northwest Territories. Before I continue, Mr. Chair, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you for the work done by Standing Committee for Accountability and Oversight to review the main estimates and business plans, and a thank you to the chairperson and deputy chairperson of the committee for their leadership and effort in carrying out our discussions. The fiscal sustainability strategy that is guiding how the N.W.T manages the public dollars available to deliver all of the programs and services across our 33 communities is just that. It's the government's fiscal strategy. It is not a priority of the Legislative Assembly. However, it is the means by which the government can give assurance that there will be funds available to achieve all of our shared goals. I'm remarking on this because I want to acknowledge that Standing Committee does not have to align itself with that fiscal strategy. Having said that, I am grateful that Standing Committee has been mindful of the challenging economic and fiscal circumstances that we find ourselves in when engaging in discussions about where and how, as a government, we should be expending public dollars over the next fiscal year. I am committing to some budgetary changes that will increase overall operational spending. However, those changes are modest and reflect the Assembly's priorities. Importantly, rather than focusing solely on huge financial swings, we were able to engage in significant discussion towards various policy changes or commitments that are being funded from within the financial parameters proposed in Budget 2024-25. We have agreed to add $13.349 million to the budget to support several priorities, with $6.571 million of that being ongoing. I commit to bringing these financial changes forward as supplementary estimates in the October 2024 session. I will describe each of these financial changes as well as discuss several key policy commitments, and I will also table in the House tomorrow a detailed list of all of the changes that we have agreed to. First, under the suitability, accessibility, and affordability of housing, this, Mr. Chair, was the subject of considerable discussion in this House. In committee's tabled report on the budget, there was a significant ask for $200 million over 4 years. The need for more housing units across the spectrum of housing need, from transitional housing to market units, is beyond the capacity of the GNWT alone to afford or deliver. We must continue to take opportunities when they are available to maximize availability and affordability in this sector. The 2024-25 budget will see an increase of $3 million this year to assist with housing N.W.T's maintenance and repair work in the communities that need it most. This funding will help bridge the funding gap in maintenance while housing N.W.T assesses their core housing needs to address the ongoing issue forward. We also commit to working to improve access to housing without spending more. We will intend to align housing supports to the education, culture, and employment income assistance changes so that public housing benefits for seniors and people with disabilities can be provided without monthly reporting. The Litzel-Kay-Dene First Nation is collaborating currently with Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and the mineral resource sector to help build 10 units in Litzel-Kay. And we commit to help make this project a success by adding $580,000 in the budget for the Litzel-Kay-Dene First Nation to be able to get the supplies for this housing project on the August 2024 barge. A strong economic foundation. Several of the additional funding commitments help build a strong economic foundation from which residents can better participate in the labor market, support communities to build local infrastructure, support local employment, and also set the stage for opportunities that can bring or foster future economic growth. We commit an additional $3.5 million in ongoing funding to increase the amount that early learning and childcare providers are being paid. We will continue to engage with the federal government to try to leverage additional federal funds under the early learning and childcare agreements to enhance early learning and childcare provider compensation. The last two commitments under this heading also support having safe communities. The GNWT will add $1 million to the Small Community Employment Program to ensure a continued focus on promoting employment in communities that need it most. This funding is committed on an ongoing basis and is an important part in ensuring stability and promoting employment in small local economies. The Community Access Program provides financial contributions and technical assistance to community governments and Indigenous government organizations for projects to improve community access roads and marine facilities. We know that insufficient funding for infrastructure simply increases future costs, and this is why we are reinstating $1.5 million in funding for the Community Access Program under this budget. Mr. Chair, there is strong support for Aurora College to transition into a polytechnic facility, and that is why we are agreeing to provide a further $500,000 in 24-25 to Aurora College to support the activities needed to become a polytechnic facility. Access to healthcare and addressing the effects of trauma. Mr. Chair, midwives provide a valuable service to support healthcare in a culturally sensitive and trauma-informed way. The GNWT supports midwifery and continues to support the expansion of midwifery to communities where women otherwise do not have access to birthing services. To help achieve that goal, we will reinstate the manager and senior consultant midwifery positions for a total of $331,000 ongoing. Health and Social Services also commits within the life of this government to expand midwifery services to cover 2 more communities that do not have birthing services, including Betchaco and a yet-to-be-determined second community. Mr. Chair, we all know that caregivers need more supports, and we commit further to add $240,000 ongoing to the budget for respite services for families in the Northwest Territories. Also, in addition to the 2 transitional housing for addiction recovery program locations already underway as part of Budget 2024, the GNWT commits to continue the expansion of this program to other communities in the NWT within the life of this government. And we will be conducting the necessary engagement with local community governments and organizations towards this goal. The Department of Health and Social Services will also be phasing the rollout of the Extended Health Benefits Program. For the first year of the program, applicants who fall below Band 10 of the income thresholds will see their contributions held at zero, while the department gathers data on who is accessing the program and for what services. Health and Social Services will also continue to work towards a system human resources plan that integrates several of the suggestions to prioritize the recruitment and retention of health professional staff and includes targets for training and hiring Indigenous staff established in its Department Indigenous Employment Plan. Mr. Chair, funding to maintain the Fort Smith Correctional Centre will be reinstated for budget 2024-25. I've spoken more than once about the important role that employee feedback played in the fiscal sustainability work that is underway across the N.W.T. Since the release of the 24-25 budget, we have continued to receive further feedback to support cost savings within corrections and its underutilized facilities. In addition, we all know the need for community wellness, aftercare supports, transitional housing, and much more in the space of addressing the effects of trauma is significant. However, we do not want to put a deadline on doing the hard work of developing a plan to support those objectives. And when those objectives and pathway to healing must be determined by communities and regional Indigenous governments. The N.W.T will continue to update this Assembly and the public on progress in this space. Mr. Chair, I would venture to say that most everyone in this room has at one stage of their political career or another spoke about the need for change to improve the lives of Northerners in a real and meaningful way. The North is not short on opportunities or ideas, and the work to present this budget for 24-25 with all of the associated commitments that it will fund is a testament to those ideas and opportunities. The hard work of maintaining our fiscal ability to deliver will be ongoing, but by working together, we can be creative, compassionate, and patient as we all work for the residents of the Northwest Territories. This concludes my opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does the Minister of Finance wish to bring witnesses into the House?
Sure. No, thank you.
Thank you. Does the committee agree to proceed to the detail contained in the tabled documents? Agreed? Thank you. Committee, we have deferred key activities and departmental summaries of multiple departments. The committee has agreed to review all deferred items within the main estimates today. We will resume review of the main estimates beginning with the Legislative Assembly on page 5. Legislative Assembly Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary 2024-2025 Main Estimates $26,275,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to education, culture, and employment. We will start by reviewing the activities that the committee previously deferred. Please turn to page 40. Education, culture, and employment. Early Learning Operational Expenditure Summary 2024-2025 Main Estimates $25,396,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Please turn to page 45. Education, culture, and employment Education Operational Expenditure Summary 2024-2025 Main Estimates $236,524,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Please turn to page 54. Education, culture, and employment, labor development and standards operational expenditure summary 2024-2025 main estimates $16,857,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Committee, we will now review the departmental total. Please turn to page 29. Education, culture, and employment total department operational expenditure summary 2024-2025 main estimates $374,989,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Environment and Climate Change. Please turn to page 75. Environment and Climate Change, Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $126,205,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of the Executive and Indigenous Affairs. Please turn to page 123. Executive and Indigenous Affairs, Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $24,253,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Finance. Please turn to page 153. Finance Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $358,407,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Health and Social Services. Please turn to page 196. Health and Social Services, Administrative and Support Services, Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $58,109,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Please turn to page 185. Health and Social Services Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $644,228,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Industry and Tourism and Investment. Please turn to page 227. Industry and Tourism and Investment Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $63,392,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Infrastructure. Please turn to page 257. Infrastructure Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $307,147,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Justice. Please turn to page 314. Justice Legal and Aid Services Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $7,645,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Please turn to page 297. Justice Total Department Operational Expenditure Summary, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $148,586,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to the Department of Municipal and Community Affairs. Please turn to page 335. Municipal and Community Affairs Total Department Operational Expenditure, 2024-2025 Main Estimates, $156,327,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to Housing Northwest Territories. Please turn to page 379. This is an information item. It is not votable total. Does not the committee agree that it has concluded consideration of main estimates of housing of the Northwest Territories? Agreed? Thank you. Please turn to Thank you. Please turn to page XX of the document to find the borrowing plan for the government reporting entity and establish borrowing limits for the government of the Northwest Territories. Borrowing plan for the government reporting entity and establish borrowing limits for the government of the Northwest Territories. The total considered borrowing is $1,616,110,000. Does the committee agree? Does the committee agree that it has concluded the consideration of table documents 93-20 brackets 1, main estimates 2024-2025? Member from the for Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that consideration of table document 93-20 bracket 1, 2024-2025 main estimates be now concluded, and that the table document 93-20 bracket 1 be reported and recommended as ready for further consideration in formal session through the form of an appropriation bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. The motion is in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Table documents 93-20 brackets 1 will be reported as ready for consideration in formal session through the form of an appropriation bill. What is the wish of committee? Member from Nunavut Lake.
Mr. Chair, I move that the chair rise and report progress.
The motion is in order. The motion is not debatable. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. I will not rise and report progress. Merci.
Member from Tunde-Willowday.
Mr. Speaker, your committee has been considering table documents 93-20 brackets 1, table documents 111-20 brackets 1, and would like to report progress 2. Motions carried that consideration of table documents 93-20 brackets 1 and table documents 111-20 brackets 1 concluded, that the consideration table documents 93 and 111-20 brackets 1 are concluded, and that the House concur in those estimates as amended, and that an appropriation bill bills be based thereon be introduced without delay. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee of the whole be concurred with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Tunde-Willowday. To the report. I have a seconder. I think I'm going to go to the member from the date show.
You're getting a bonus.
To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Consideration Committee of the Whole, reports in Committee of the Whole, reports in Committee of the Whole, third reading of bills, order of the day. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day for Thursday, June 13th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Prayer, Minister Statements, Member Statements, Returns to Oral Questions, Recognition of Visitors in the Gallery, Acknowledgements, Oral Questions, Written Questions, Returns to Written Questions, Replies to the Commissioner's Address, Petitions, Reports of Committees on the Review of Bills, Reports of Standing and Special Committees, Tabling of Documents, Notices of Motion, Motions 36, 37, 38, and 39, Notice of Motion for First Reading of Bills, First Reading of Bills, Second Reading of Bills, Consideration in Committee of the Whole of Bills and Other Matters, Report of Committee of the Whole, Third Reading of Bills, Orders of the Day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This House stands adjourned until Tuesday, June 13th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Thursday. What did I say? Tuesday? Oh, let's try that again. This House stands adjourned until Thursday, June 13th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.